Hey everyone, welcome to Sidetrack Adventures. This is Steve. Right now we are in southeastern Arizona, about 9 miles from Tombstone, probably the most famous town of the Old West. Near here, this piece of desert was once home to the Clanton family, the cattlemen and outlaws who are forever tied to the gunfight at the OK Corral. Today, the ruins of their ranch tell a story of frontier survival, lawlessness, and the feud that helped create the legend of Tombstone. We're going to head out into the desert and try and explore what's left of this historic site and uncover the story behind one of the most notorious families of the Old West and the father who shaped them. We are starting out today at the Escapole Trailhead, which is located pretty much halfway between Tombstone and Sierra Vista as the crow flies. And before we get going, I do have to point out for full transparency, while it is widely believed what we're heading to was the Clanton Ranch, there is still some debate on it. The trail we'll be taking is the Sky Islands Traverse, which runs over 500 miles through southeastern Arizona. We'll only be covering about a mile of it. Regardless if where we're going was actually the ranch or not, it was for certain somewhere in this area, and nearly every notorious figure from Tombstone was out here at some point. People like Johnny Ringo, Curly Bill Brocious, the McLaurys, and of course the Clantons. The gunfight at the OK Corral, between the Earps with Doc Holliday and the Clantons and the McLaurys, is the most well-known shootout of the Old West. But the Clanton story didn't start there. Old Man Clanton had already carved out a reputation as a rustler and outlaw king, setting the stage for the bloody drama his sons would bring to Tombstone. The Clantons were part of a group known as the Cochise County Cowboys, which has been called an early example of organized crime in the United States. In the 1870s, the word cowboy didn't mean what it does now, and was pretty much an insult. Cowboy meant an outlaw or cattle rustler. The area to our right has probably changed little over the last 150 years, or even the last 1,000 years. We are firmly in the middle of the desert right now. One thing we'll have to keep a watch for out here is javelina, especially as we get closer to the San Pedro River. They are a kind of pig-like animal that will probably avoid us, but they can be aggressive. Usually we only see them from far away. Getting back to the Clantons, Newman Haynes Clanton, otherwise known as Old Man Clanton, was born in Tennessee around 1816. Clanton was a plantation owner and slaveholder before moving his family to Missouri in the 1840s. Over the next decade, he would move his family around quite a bit, eventually settling in Texas. Around this time, Clanton and his sons also began to get a reputation for thuggery that would follow them around everywhere they went for the rest of their lives. When the Civil War came, Newman Clanton was already a man in his mid-40s, living with his family in Texas. Too old for regular duty, alongside his eldest son, John Wesley, he enlisted in the Confederate Home Guard, a local militia meant to defend the settlements and supply lines, while younger men marched off to war. Both he and his son would later become deserters, which wasn't uncommon for members of the Home Guard. After the Civil War ended, he briefly moved his family here to Arizona, near Fort Bowie, then to California, where his wife passed away after 26 years of marriage. In 1873, he returned to Arizona. In 1877, he moved to this area, and as luck would have it, that same year silver was found nearby, and Tombstone became a boomtown. In less than 18 months, Tombstone went from a population of about 100 miners to 7,000 people. From here, we can see the San Pedro River in the distance. Pretty much any settlement in the area was built near this river, with the exception of Tombstone. Tombstone was really one of the last Wild West frontier towns, and for that reason it was somewhat of a magnet for outlaws, who headed to the area to avoid civilization encroaching elsewhere. On paper, the Clanton Ranch was a legitimate cattle operation, but the real profits came from rustling. Old Man Clanton and his crew drove stolen herds north across the Mexican border, fattening them on Arizona grass, and selling them off to the hungry mining camps around Tombstone. It was a simple system, but one built on blood and risk. Old Man Clanton didn't claim the title of leader, but his ranch was their hub, and he was their elder statesman. And he definitely wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty himself. What went down in Tombstone is a long story, but Virgil Earp had been appointed U.S. Marshal for Eastern Pima County in Prescott, and was directed to relocate to Tombstone to concentrate on suppressing the Cowboys' illegal activities. He arrived with his brothers Wyatt and Morgan. Eventually, Virgil Earp was hired as Tombstone's city marshal, and Wyatt Earp was appointed as Pima County deputy sheriff. To give a short version of what happened, tensions between the Earps and the Cowboys escalated through threats, arrests, and confrontations in saloons until both factions were on the verge of open conflict. Eventually, this all came to a head on October 26, 1881, at the gunfight at the OK Corral, a 30-second exchange of gunfire in a vacant lot near Fremont Street that became one of the most famous events in the history of the American West. On one side, you had the Earps, Virgil, Wyatt, and Morgan, with Doc Holliday, and facing them were Billy Clanton, Frank and Tom McLaury, and Ike Clanton and Billy Claiborne, who both fled when the shooting began. When the smoke cleared, Billy Clanton and both McLaury brothers were dead, while Virgil, Morgan, and Doc Holliday were wounded. Wyatt Earp walked away unscathed. Old Man Clanton didn't live to see the famous gunfight, though. He met his end a couple of months earlier, in the summer of 1881. On our left side, between us and the river, there's an old barbed wire fence with a sign that used to say, "Who knows what?" And this is looking more like the type of area where we might run into some javelina. We're probably making enough noise, though, where it's unlikely we'll see any. In 1879, in what became known as the Skeleton Canyon Massacre, a party of Mexican smugglers was ambushed as they drove their pack train north through the canyon. Reports linked the Clanton gang and their cowboy allies to the slaughter of dozens of men, their goods stolen, and the bodies left behind. Johnny Ringo later claimed to have been involved in the massacre, and named Old Man Clanton, along with Ike and Billy Clanton and Frank and Tom McLaury, as participants. While this account can't be fully verified, it cemented the Clanton name in the region's bloody reputation. Then in 1881, another ambush occurred in Skeleton Canyon, where several Mexicans were killed and thousands of dollars worth of silver and livestock were stolen. Once again, Old Man Clanton was widely believed to have been connected. It is definitely a warm day today, but luckily we're out here a little early and we have a bit of a cloud cover that makes the sun not too bad yet. When you're out in the desert, it's always good to stay on trails whenever possible, because there are a lot of plants that want to hurt you. And it does look like the brush gets a little bit thicker up ahead, but this is where we're going to be making a turn. There are no signs directing us to the ranch, but this is the first trail that heads to the east. Because of the massacres at Skeleton Canyon, Mexican forces were sent north in retaliation. On August 13th, 1881, they caught up with Old Man Clanton and a group of rustlers camped in Guadalupe Canyon with stolen cattle. At dawn, while some of the men were still sleeping, the raiders opened fire. Clanton, who was reportedly preparing breakfast, was shot and killed instantly, collapsing into the campfire. 5 of the 7 rustlers were killed in the attack, leaving the Clanton patriarch dead just months before his son's feud with the Earps exploded in Tombstone. And we should be just about to the ranch site. I believe we just have to make a turn right here, then it should be a couple 100 feet away. And yeah, here it is. Right where that wooden pole is. It looks like we may have found where the ranch's garbage dump was. Though it doesn't look like most of this stuff would date to the 1870s, but this place was in use for a long time, as we'll see. But if you were doing illegal activities back in the 1800s and you wanted a place that was far from watchful eyes, this is about as good as you can get. We're pretty much in the middle of nowhere now. Back in the 1870s, this was really the middle of nowhere. So from what I've read, this wooden post is original, and the adobe wall is from the original building out here. Here's a closer look at that wooden post, and behind it is the foundation of the later ranch house. And this adobe wall is all that's left of the original building. So not a whole lot, but it's pretty cool to think that somebody like Johnny Ringo may have leaned against this wall at some point. And this structure over here is much newer. I mean, relatively speaking, I guess. But this is probably from sometime in the early 1900s to maybe the mid-1900s. Nobody seems to know an exact date of when this was built, but it looks like they did have at least some plumbing. And it looks like it says something on the bricks here. Well, looks like it says Ugless, so probably Douglas. My guess would be that these bricks were manufactured in Douglas, Arizona, which isn't too far from here. Looking back at the original structure, this adobe wall looks nearly identical to the walls you could find where Charleston once was, showing that they were probably built around the same time. Since we're on a bit of a hill, this place was a good vantage point to see anyone approaching from pretty far away. It's a little difficult to see with the brush now, but looking this direction, Tombstone is this way, so anyone coming from there would be visible for quite some distance. And looking this way, Millville and Charleston would have been in this direction. So really anyone heading to the ranch, the people here would have had a pretty good warning someone was coming. There may not be a lot to see here now, but for a few years in the 1800s, this may have been the epicenter of criminal activity in the area. Or at least the epicenter of cattle rustling. I wish we knew a little bit more about this later building. The bricks out here definitely have an interesting design to them. You don't see walls built like this too often. I wonder if it helped with the heat or what the purpose of this design was. I've gone out into the brush a little bit, and of course there's some metal out here. But I saw something over here that kind of caught my eye. Let me see if I can get over there. I'm wearing jeans, but the thorns out here have no problem going through them. Oh, and right here there's some metal siding. This probably ties into what I think I found over here. But right here you could kind of see where the ground has sunken in a bit. This is probably where the outhouse was. You'll often find cans or bottles near where old outhouses were, because back then people would be drinking something and throw their trash right into the toilet. And here you could kind of see where we are in relation to the buildings. Here's another brick with writing on it, and so this does confirm that the bricks do say Douglas. So it was said that Clanton built a large adobe house on the ranch, and kind of looking around, it's hard to get a grasp of how big the adobe building here would have been. All we have is this one little piece of wall, and 150 years has probably changed the ground out here quite a bit. It's likely not as level as it once was. But here we could kind of see the area where this structure would have been. And as far as this post goes, I have no idea if this would have been inside the building or outside. I guess it could have been something to help keep the roof up. While most people do think this was the Clanton Ranch, as I mentioned earlier, there is some dispute on that, but regardless whether this was their ranch or not, I think this place gives a pretty good idea of what life would have been like at the time the Clantons lived out here. This would have been a rough life, especially during the summer. In about 30 minutes, I'm going to be back in an air-conditioned car, and that's definitely not an option they had. Even though Old Man Clanton moved away and died fairly far from here, he eventually came back. And that's where we're going to head next, to Tombstone and the Boot Hill Graveyard. We are in Tombstone now, and this is the location where the gunfight at the OK Corral took place. Well, on the other side of this wall at least. But we're not here for the OK Corral. We're going to head about a mile down the road. So this is Tombstone's Boot Hill Graveyard, and it's filled with graves from the famous and infamous from Tombstone's Wild West days. But the grave we're looking for is over here in the far corner of the cemetery. Here are the graves of the McLaury brothers and Billy Clanton, who were killed at the gunfight at the OK Corral. And right next to them is the final resting place of Old Man Clanton. Old Man Clanton was originally buried in New Mexico, but in 1882, his sons Ike and Finn Clanton had his body exhumed and reburied here next to his youngest son. The Clanton legacy of crime didn't end here, however. Finn Clanton had a number of run-ins with the law, and Ike Clanton, who survived the gunfight at the OK Corral, would be killed in 1887 while resisting arrest near Eagar, Arizona, and was buried in an unmarked grave. The Clantons didn't just leave graves behind. For better or worse, their story has become woven into the fabric of Tombstone and Arizona itself, securing their place as one of the most notorious families of the Old West. So that's our look at Old Man Clanton and the site of the Clanton Ranch. Maybe. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.